Red Bull just tested a version of the RB22 that they tried to hide, and what leaked from Silverstone could explain why they have been losing over half a second per lap. No press release. No cameras. No public schedule. Just Max Verstappen, alone, driving a car that suddenly includes design elements every other team had from the start. And that detail changes everything. Because teams do not add basic aerodynamic pieces mid-season, unless something was seriously wrong. Right now, Red Bull is not chasing performance. They are trying to fix a car that was never fully right. And inside these new upgrades, there is one hidden change that could either bring them back into the fight, or confirm that this season is already slipping away. Subscribe now, because the real reason behind these upgrades is far more serious than anyone expected, and it connects to a decision that started months ago. The moment those images came out, engineers across the paddock started looking twice. Because at first glance, it did not look revolutionary. No extreme shapes. No radical concept. Nothing that screams innovation. But then, the details started to appear. Small additions on the front wing. Subtle changes in how the air is guided around the front tires. And that is where things get serious. Because those are not performance upgrades. Those are correction pieces. Elements that every other team already had, from the very first race. Red Bull did not. And now, suddenly, they do. Which immediately raises a bigger question. Why was the RB22 running without them in the first place? Because in Formula 1, you do not ignore something so fundamental, unless something else is forcing your hand. And that something was weight. The car was too heavy. Not slightly. Significantly. Enough to cost huge lap time. Enough to force compromises across the entire design. And when a car carries extra weight, engineers start making sacrifices. You remove components. You simplify airflow structures. You reduce aerodynamic load in specific areas. Not to go faster. Just to make the car manageable. That is exactly what Red Bull had to do at the start of the season. They stripped away complexity, just to keep balance under control. Now at Silverstone, they are bringing that complexity back. Carefully. Piece by piece. Trying to recover the performance they gave up. But this creates a new risk. Because every element you add, changes the airflow. And if the underlying problem is not solved, you do not fix the car. You make it even more unpredictable. And that is the word that keeps coming back inside the paddock. Unpredictable. Drivers cannot fully trust it. Engineers cannot fully model it. And Verstappen is the one feeling all of it. That is why he was the only driver on track that day. Not for convenience. For precision. Because when a car behaves inconsistently, you need one reference. One driver. One feedback loop. One clear answer. Does this fix the problem, or make it worse? But here is where this block connects to something much deeper. Because those front wing changes, as important as they look, are not the real story. They are just the visible part. The surface. The real transformation is happening in a place no camera could capture that day. And that hidden area is where Red Bull is either solving everything, or realizing that the problem is far bigger than anyone expected. What no one could clearly see at Silverstone is the part that matters the most. Not the front wing. Not the visible bodywork. The floor. Everything in modern Formula 1 depends on it. Downforce is generated there. Stability begins there. Confidence comes from there. And right now, that is exactly where Red Bull has been struggling. Because the RB22 was designed around an extremely aggressive concept. Tighter packaging. Narrower sidepods. Less space for airflow to breathe. On paper, it looked efficient. On track, it became unstable. Airflow does not stay consistent. The balance shifts corner to corner. The rear of the car does not always respond the same way twice. And that creates something drivers hate more than anything else. Doubt. Because when you turn into a corner, you need certainty. You need to know what the car will do. If that disappears, even the fastest driver in the world starts hesitating. Lifting slightly earlier. Holding back just a fraction. And in Formula 1, that fraction is everything. This is why the Silverstone test was not about speed. It was about understanding. Every lap Verstappen completed was feeding information back to the team. Is the airflow cleaner? Is the rear more planted? Does the car behave the same way every single time? And if the answer is no, then the issue is not an upgrade problem. It is a concept problem. Because you can adjust wings. You can reduce weight. You can refine surfaces. But if the floor concept itself is unstable, you are not fixing the car. You are chasing it. Now here is where it becomes even more critical. There were already signs that the issue goes beyond aerodynamics. Cooling. Subtle at first. But then, impossible to ignore. The car had to be managed during races. Power had to be limited. Performance had to be sacrificed. Not because the engine is weak. In fact, the engine is competitive. That is what makes this even more frustrating. The power is there, but the chassis cannot use it properly. And when cooling becomes unstable, everything else suffers. Temperatures rise. Efficiency drops. Confidence disappears even further. So now, everything connects. An unstable floor. An aggressive design. Cooling limitations. Weight issues. All happening at the same time. And Red Bull is trying to fix all of it, in a single development push. That is what makes the Silverstone test so important. Because it was not just a test. It was a checkpoint. A moment where the team had to answer one question. Is this direction working, or are we already too far off? But there is one more layer to this. One that explains why these problems appeared in the first place. Because none of this started at the track. None of this started during testing. It started much earlier. With a decision that at the time looked correct. And now, might be the reason Red Bull is fighting to recover instead of dominating. And once you see that decision clearly, everything about the RB22 suddenly makes sense. The truth is, this situation did not start with a bad upgrade. It started with a decision. A decision made months before the RB22 ever touched the track. At the end of last season, Red Bull had a choice to make. Shift full focus to the new regulations early, or keep pushing the previous car, chasing one more title. They chose to keep fighting. They extended development. They delayed the transition. They kept investing time where other teams had already moved on. And in Formula One, timing is everything. Because while Red Bull was still refining the past, their rivals were already building the future. By the time Red Bull fully committed to the RB22, they were already behind in the most critical phase. Concept definition. That moment where you decide how the entire car will behave. And once that window closes, you cannot go back. You can only adjust around it. Which explains why so many problems appeared at the same time. Weight distribution issues, aerodynamic imbalance, cooling limitations, an unpredictable floor. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when a project is compressed. When decisions are made faster than they should be. When validation is limited. The RB22 was not built slowly and refined. It was built under pressure. And now, that pressure is showing on track. This is why Silverstone was not just another test. It was a reality check. Because Red Bull is not simply developing performance. They are trying to realign a concept that started misaligned. And that is one of the hardest things to do in Formula One. You can bring upgrades. You can reduce weight. You can improve airflow. But changing the foundation of the car during the season, that comes with risk. Serious risk. Because every fix in one area can create a new problem in another. And that is exactly the balance Red Bull is trying to manage right now. Now here is where the pressure becomes even more intense. Because while Red Bull is trying to fix fundamental issues, other teams are not standing still. They are developing cleanly, building on stable concepts, improving performance without needing to correct mistakes. Which means Red Bull is fighting two battles at once. Fixing their car, and chasing rivals who are already ahead. That is why everything now points to one moment. Miami. That is not just another race. That is the deadline. The moment where all these changes, all these corrections, all this urgency, has to translate into performance. Because if it does, Red Bull comes back into the fight. But if it does not, then the conversation changes completely. From recovery to limitation. From solving problems to managing them. And that is the scenario no one inside Red Bull wants to face. Because it would confirm something far more serious than a slow start. It would confirm that the RB22 was compromised from the very beginning. And that everything we saw at Silverstone was not the solution. It was the last attempt to avoid that reality. Everything now comes down to one question. Did Silverstone give Red Bull the answers, or expose a much bigger problem? Because inside the team, they already know something the outside world is just starting to understand. This is not a normal development cycle. This is a limit. A boundary they are dangerously close to reaching. Because there is a point in Formula One where upgrades stop being effective. Not because the engineers are not capable, but because the concept itself cannot deliver what is needed. And if the RB22 has reached that point, then no front wing change, no weight reduction, no cooling fix, will fully solve it. It will only improve it, slightly, temporarily. And that is not enough in a championship fight. Now think about what that means for Miami. All the pressure, all the expectations, all the attention, focused on one package, one upgrade, one moment. If the car arrives there and suddenly looks stable, if Verstappen can push without hesitation, If the lap time comes back, then everything changes. Confidence returns. Momentum shifts. The season is alive again. But if even one of those elements is missing, if the car is still unpredictable, if the balance is still inconsistent, then the conclusion becomes unavoidable. Red Bull did not just start slow. They built a car that cannot be fully unlocked. And that is where the stakes become even higher. Because this is not just about one season. This is about direction. About whether the philosophy behind the RB22 is the right one moving forward. And that is why other teams are watching so closely. Not because they are afraid, but because they are curious. If Red Bull makes this concept work, it changes the design path for everyone. If they fail, it becomes a warning. A clear signal of what not to do under these regulations. So Silverstone was never just a hidden test. It was a preview. A glimpse of a solution, or a confirmation of a deeper flaw. And Miami will not just show performance. It will reveal the truth. Whether Red Bull is coming back, or whether this season has already been defined by a decision made long before the lights ever went out.